This hidden house in the trees is Crispin Lodge. It was once a grand house surrounded by fields, but now it sits empty and abandoned beside a busy bypass. Possibly built in the 1860s, the first census I find it on is from 1871. There is a John Strachan and his family living at the lodge. John is 45 and he is a district road surveyor. His wife is named Sarah H. Strachan and she is 30. They have 3 children, John L. Strachan, who is 12, Archie Larry, who is 11, and Elliot Larry Strachan, who is aged 8, and they are scholars. They have 2 domestic servants, Lydia Jones, aged 20, and Elizabeth Roberts, aged 15. 10 years later, in 1881, the Strachans are still at Crispin Lodge. John is aged 55 and still working as a district road surveyor. His wife Sarah H. is aged 44. They still have 2 children at home. There is an A. Campbell Strachan, who is 21 and an insurance clerk. I'm assuming he was down as Archie Larry on the 1871 census. And an Elliot H. Strachan, who's aged 18 and an accounts clerk. He would have been Elliot Larry on the previous census. And they have a Hannah J. Evans, who is aged 18 and she is a domestic servant. Moving on to 1891, and John Strachan is now aged 65 and still employed as a road surveyor. His wife Sarah H. is now aged 53. Their youngest son Elliot is still living with them. He is 28 and an accountant. They have 1 domestic servant named Alice Williams and she is 22. I have found 3 articles from the Wrexham Advertiser. The first is from the 24th of March 1900. The late Mr. Elliot Strachan. We regret to announce the death of Mr. Elliot H. Strachan, which took place on Wednesday at Crispin Lodge, the residence of his father, Mr. John Strachan. He was seized with severe illness about 10 days ago, and although hopes of his recovery were at times entertained, he gradually grew weaker and weaker until the end. Mr. Strachan acted for some years as honorary correspondent to the managers of the Wrexham National Schools, in which capacity he gave much satisfaction. He was also secretary to the North Wales Pomological Society, which owed much to his painstaking efforts. As a sidesman at St. Mark's Church, Mr. Strachan made himself most useful, and the services required of him were always most cheerfully rendered. The funeral takes place today, Saturday, at the Borough Cemetery at 2:30. The next is from the 3rd of November 1900. We regret to announce that late on Wednesday night, the death of Mr. John Strachan, road surveyor to the Wrexham Rural District Council, took place at his residence, Crispin Lodge. Mr. Strachan, who was 75 years of age, had been ill for about 6 weeks. At the District Council meeting held on the 4th of October, he wrote asking to be excused for non-attendance, and his condition gradually grew worse, until death took place as stated from cerebral embolism, a blood clot causing a stroke. About 2 years ago he had an attack of influenza and inflammation of the lungs supervened. Since that time his health gradually failed him. In March last he lost his son, Mr. H. Elliot Strachan, who was Honorary Secretary of the Pomological Society. That bereavement affected him very much. He is survived by his widow and 2 sons, Messrs. John and Archibald Strachan, one of whom is in Canada and another in London. By the death of Mr. Strachan, the district loses one of its most worthy public servants. The deceased was appointed District Surveyor to the late Highway Board for the Wrexham District on the 4th of May 1863. There were 30 applicants for the post, many of whom were Scotchmen. The late Captain Panton of the Royal Navy presided over the meeting, and on the first division of the voting the council was evenly divided as to the merits of the deceased and another applicant. Subsequently Mr. Strachan was appointed by a majority of 1. His 37 years' continuous service amply justified the selection then made, for Mr. Strachan's name was widely known for his capabilities as a road maker. All who must traverse the 287 miles of roads of the Wrexham Rural District Council testify to the accuracy of this statement. Until the county councils were established, Mr Strachan had charge of both highways and by-roads, and afterwards the county council took charge of the former in the Wrexham district. During the time he was surveyor, many new roads were made, and these stand now as a monument to his work. The road improvements effected in the most economical manner are too numerous to mention. The well-known figure of Mr Strachan, whether in the conveyance in which he was accommodated when travelling through the district, or in the boardroom at the workhouse where he was seldom absent from the council meetings, will be very much missed. It might be mentioned here that the deceased was an elder brother of the late Mr Yeaman Strachan, one-time mayor of Wrexham. The next article is dated the 10th of November 1900. On Monday, the funeral of Mr Strachan, who was for 37 years surveyor to the Wrexham Rural District Council and the now defunct Highway Board, took place. The obsequies were in keeping with the unassuming character of the deceased, and they were therefore simple. The mourners left the residence of the deceased in Crispin Lodge shortly before 2 o'clock, and besides the relatives there were some 30 or 40 workmen who had been under the deceased surveyor in connection with the work of the Rural District Council. The service at the cemetery was conducted by the Reverend D. Stanley Davis, Vicar of Rostow, assisted by the Reverend Canon Fletcher, Vicar of Wrexham, the remains being placed in the family vault amidst every token of sorrow and esteem. A number of pretty floral emblems and wreaths were placed around the grave. John was buried at Wrexham Cemetery with his son Elliot. The 1901 census shows Sarah H. Strachan as a widow. She is aged 63 and lives off independent means. In the house with her are Ellen K. Fernside, who is aged 19. She is listed as a visitor and working as a governess. There is also a brother and sister visiting. They are 7-year-old James W. Hugh and 6-year-old Lillian A. Hugh. There is also a 27-year-old Mary Hopley working as a domestic servant. Moving on to 1911, and there is a new family at Crispin Lodge. Frank Austin Viggers is 36 and he is a fruitier and florist. His wife is named Mary Isabella and she is aged 34. They have 4 children: Norman Austin, aged 8, Dorothy Lacon, aged 6, and they are both scholars, Oswald, aged 3, and Catherine Joan, aged 1. There is also Jane Elizabeth Davis, aged 15, and she is listed as a nurse. 10 years later, in 1921, Mary Isabella Viggers is the head of the house. She is 43 and she is a fruitier and florist. Sadly, Frank died in 1917, aged 42. There are still 3 children at home. Norman Austin is now aged 19 and he is a bank clerk. Dorothy Lacon is 16 and she is listed as an invalid, and Oswald is 13 and a scholar. There is also a 24-year-old Louisa J. Sarner and 15-year-old Nellie Williams, and they are both listed as domestics and helps in the shop. I believe the shop was called W.J. Viggers of Wrexham. Sadly, Dorothy Viggers passed away in 1921, aged 17. The household on the 1939 register is quite interesting. The head is Mary I. Ferguson. She is 63 and single. There is also Brenda Hodge, aged 6, and she is at school. Ada R. Govett, aged 35. She is single and listed as incapacitated. Usually this means mentally or physically disabled or otherwise unfit for work. Remember, at that time childless women were noted for future war work, and later childless married women were also needed to do their bit. There is also an Isabel Louisa Viggers, aged 24, and she works as a state-registered hospital nurse. I have found that this Isabel is a relation to the previous Viggers family, but I don't know what the connections between the other members of the household are. Let me know in the comments what you think. I do know that the Viggers family was still living at the lodge up until at least 1973, as I have found 2 newspaper articles from the Liverpool Daily News. The first is dated the 3rd of April 1962. Skiffle boy dies as he prepares group's new headquarters. 16-year-old Grove Park schoolboy David Southwell died after being found unconscious yesterday near an outbuilding at the house of a fellow pupil. He is believed to have been electrocuted. The tragedy occurred at Crispin Lodge, and close to where the boy was found were an electric cable and a pair of pliers. Son of Mr. Albert Southwell of Wrexham, David was a member of a skiffle group who are understood to have been planning to use the building for their practices. He was the singer in the group who called themselves the Phantoms. Mrs. A. Viggers, who occupies the lodge, made an emergency call after finding the boy near the outside wall of the building. He was rushed by ambulance to Wrexham War Memorial Hospital, where doctors fought in vain to save his life. David was in his first year in the sixth form at Grove Park School and was to receive his GCE certificate at Speech Day prize giving a week tomorrow. The death has been reported to Mr. Edmund Pickles, East Denbighshire coroner. The last article comes from the 3rd of April 1973. Front Gate Hell. Mrs. Anita Viggers, pictured here climbing over the mountain of soil and rubble at her front gate, spoke of the absolute hell she had endured from roadworks during construction of the Wrexham bypass. Her home at Crispin Lodge is at the junction where an interchange is being built to take traffic over the bypass. This has been going on for months, she said. Earth has been piled up at the front of the house and I have had to make a 2-mile detour to get in and out. I have been virtually cut off from my front entrance. Window panes have cracked or broken. There are stones on the roof that must have been flung there during earth moving. And what with these great big juggernauts working on 2 sides, the noise has been terrible. Then there is the vibration. The whole house judders. It is a miracle it has not fallen down. As it is, the doors have become jammed and I have had to have them re-hung. Mrs. Viggers, an art teacher, hopes the work will be completed quickly so that she can get back to normal living. I am angry and fed up with all this upset. There seems to be no consideration at all for the individuals these days, she added. How ironic that the former house of a road surveyor was 100 years later being affected by a new road build. Anita was married to Norman Austin Viggers, who was living at the lodge in 1911 and 1921. They married in 1940. Norman died in 1990, aged 87, and Anita Viggers died in 1991, aged 85. The house last sold in July 2022 for £235,000 and was purchased by Mary McLeavy, director of ALCJ Properties Limited of Chester. Go in then and see what is left inside. Look at these, I presume they're like cast iron pillars or stone. Would have been a lovely house at one point. It's the old door. As you can hear, it's right by a main road, very busy main road. It's just got no windows left in it at all. Oh god. This floorboard is very dodgy. It's round here past the bike. Staircase, I presume it was a servant staircase. Yeah. We'll see if we can come back down that way. Let's carry on through into the other rooms down here. Step over the door. More bikes, more stairs. Jesus. I don't know if that's the main staircase. This would have been the living room. Right, carry on through to another room downstairs. Just a little room. Downstairs bathroom by the looks of it, just absolutely trashed. I'm guessing that was a shower. So that's all the rooms downstairs. So we'll go up this main staircase. See what it's like upstairs. Here's the main staircase. Go and have a look. Right, just come up those stairs and there's 2 rooms off this landing. But there's more rooms through there. But no door through, so you have to go up those other stairs that I found to get to those other rooms. But someone has been lazy and just kicked their way through, but we won't do that. Right, just got a room up here, a little room. You can see out. So as you can see, right next to a busy road. Looks like there's some outhouses. So we'll have a look around outside in a mo. Yeah, little kids' room by the looks of it. And then we've just got this big room here. Lovely big room. Another big window. As you can see, it's just totally trashed. There is an attic space up there. Look at this window. It's like full length. Out onto the garden. You can see that lovely porchway there. Yeah, I'm not going to climb through there. Right, and so we'll head back down these stairs and find those other stairs that went up. So these are the other stairs. It's dark up there. Let's go and have a look. So there's the other side of that hall. Help me. Another big room. And then there's just one more room here. Right, well that's it inside the house. It's very strange that there's 2 separate stairs to 2 separate upstairs bits, but I don't know. Maybe it was a house of multiple occupants, who knows. I've heard of bringing a parking cone home when you're drunk, but not one of those. So I've got an old outhouse there. Might have been an outside toilet at some point. It does look like it was maybe a farm at some point. Originally it would have been surrounded by lots of land. Now it's just surrounded by a road. So yeah, it definitely looks like it was a farm. Some land there. We've got an old garage here. Some more like outhouses. And then you can see the house the other side of that fencing. Got all this land here.